Yes! What is up, everybody? Welcome to the U.S. Men's National Team Hour presented by the Qué Golazo podcast. You're here with your two favorite former U.S. Men's National Team players, Jimmy Conrad and Heath Pearce. And we have a lot to break down because there's a lot of players in the U.S. Men's National Team pool that are doing some things. So the U.S. Men's National Team Hour begins right now. Okay, everybody. I'm here with Hollywood Heath Pearce. Hollywood, before I go any steps further, how are you doing? Looking great.
I'm doing pretty good. Actually, I just looked and I feel great and I also look great. You know, I wore my anytime that I was putting this t-shirt on, and it's a Hard Rock Cafe New York t-shirt, and it was a gift from somebody, and it's one of these ones that every spring cleaning last year, it felt very American that we're going to do the USMNT hour, and you got the Hard Rock Cafe, you know, New York t-shirt on. How you doing, man?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm talking about the soccer, and I'm enjoying it. And the fact that we have some news to discuss around some U.S. Men's National Team players makes me feel all warm and fuzzy inside, which I don't know if that should make me feel all warm and fuzzy. I don't know. I should probably talk to somebody.
There are some things. I think you vaguely put there are some players doing some things, and there's going to be some good things to talk about, and there's going to be some
that's right.
You know. Room for improvement, as you would say.
Room for improvement. Well, if you're just watching us now, hit that like and subscribe button. We want as many subscribers as we can get so we can flex on all of our friends. So make that happen. We're getting very close to 10,000 here on the Qué Golazo podcast. It would mean a lot to us in particular as we grind out. It's not even a grind for us because we love doing it, but as we grind out this content for you guys. Now, let's talk about, I think, the biggest story for U.S. Men's National Team players around the world. It is Gio Reyna, who, and I think I mentioned this to you before, Heath, where we talked to Claudio on CBS Sports HQ, and he was very complimentary of the Dortmund staff and how they've been bringing him along, that he's actually been healthy from this hamstring issue for about a month, but they didn't want to rush him back into it. And so you saw after the international break, they gave him about 15 minutes as a super sub. Then he came on at halftime in the next game. And then they started him this weekend against Borussia Mönchengladbach, which ended up being a very important 6-0 win for the black and yellow. But Gio Reyna got hurt 25, 30 minutes into the game. He goes off crying. And now, obviously, we're fearing the worst. Nothing gets announced for about 24 hours. And it looks like it's only going to be about 14 days until he can start joining into the team exercises again. Obviously, that allays some of my fears, but there's still a lot to unpack here with an injury of this magnitude because it feels like it could still plant a seed of doubt in his mind. Heath, you've come back from injuries before, and to regain that trust that when you make that burst, nothing's going to happen takes a little bit, especially if you've had a setback like Gio did.
Yeah, and we've seen this, to put it into context for USMNT, we've seen this with Christian Pulisic, where as the injuries go on, you see them at times where they just look a little bit guarded, right? And guarded is a really dangerous place to be in when you're coming back from an injury, because that leads to the compensation of other muscles having to do some of that work, right? And mentally, it's hard. And when you have these types of setbacks, you can see what it meant to him when he got injured, right? It was this like, I just had this long way back. He's thinking probably in his mind about the World Cup coming up. He's thinking about just getting back on the field and finally working his way back, right? They worked him slowly. And when you're a player of his age, of any age, it's important for the medical staff to protect the player from himself, because the moment you feel semi-good, it's just like when you go out to the park or whether you played professionally or not, you know, you feel like, I should probably take a rest day, but then your mind goes, yeah, but you should also go play pickup with your friends. And that's when injuries happen, right? Like you have to protect, and fortunately they have a medical staff that can protect them from themselves.
Right.
And so for him, I'm sure it was a frustration every time feeling, you know, Jimmy, you said 15 minutes, 40 minutes, but when you're that player, you're like, I'm fit, dude, put me in. Like, I want to start. Like, let me play the game. I'm watching this from a distance. This is torturing me. And to be that close to come take a step back, I think can be really detrimental. It's good news that it's only a short-term thing. At least that's what we're hearing. But it's also one of those things where you've just added like a little bit of another little notch in your belt of an injury, right? And as those start to mount up over your career, at least for me, and I know many others that I've talked to and want to know your take as well, it starts to almost live in your head, right? The moment you start to have a little bit of something, you know, a little bit off. Oh, you got this tightness in your hip flexor, or like, oh, that was a weird little feeling in my ankle or my knee or my whatever. It starts to live in your head a lot more consciously, right? And it can have this long-term effect. Hopefully that's not the case, but I know that when you start to have these back-to-backs, it's really hard. The mental side is even harder than the physical side. I don't know what your take is on that.
Well, mine is literally about my head, because after I suffered a really bad concussion against Panama in the Gold Cup in 2009, I got knocked out cold, 20 minutes of post-impact amnesia. You were there, Heath, as I was rattling out nonsense in the locker room while I was knocked out. And
you said something that I don't remember what it was, but you said something, and I just had a deja vu of something that you said in the locker room, which was really scary. But like, you were saying something that wasn't making any sense to me, and it just literally came to me, and I don't know what it was. But yeah,
I've tried to mine these little tidbits of info from you, because I got hurt before the half was over, so I was in the locker room when everybody came back, and I was out of it. I mean, I was awake, but I wasn't awake, and that's a scary proposition to think about. And when I woke up, I was in the ambulance, and I could only see out of the bottom half of my left eye, and that was scary when you start to all of a sudden come to, and you don't really know what's happening or where you were, or even how you got to that spot. So I'm very curious if I was cracking jokes when I was kind of knocked out of it, or if I was talking some trash when I shouldn't be, because you have obviously no filter when you're all knocked out. And
if
bloody.
You take the rest of the show and I sit very still and just try to mentally get there, I might be able to mine that thought of what it was, because it just came to me, and I remember I have this distinct image. But anyways, we'll try to figure that out later. But
yeah, sure. But I was going to say that after I suffered that concussion, I just became a little bit more timid in my decision to go up for headers. And then when I did get or have a header, if I got hit in the head with another head or a ball or with an elbow or whatever, I just felt like my headache lasted a little bit longer. Was that me prolonging that on my own, or I don't really know. So there's a lot to unpack here. And obviously, this is still an injury where you're still thinking about it the same type of way. Concussions feel a little bit more serious, of course, than maybe a muscle, like a leg injury. But in terms of the mentality and gaining confidence in that particular part of your body, it can last. And we're not just talking about Gio Reyna. Pulisic has had these issues too, and he now's kind of got
Adams has back issues.
He's got back issues. We've seen other guys, get injuries, and so it's interesting how this impacts it. And
Tim Weah was out for
that's right. Tim Weah is a great shout. Yeah. That's another good one. So before we get into kind of the bigger conversation about why our attacking players get hurt a lot, let's focus back on Gio Reyna. So if he's back in 2 weeks training with the team, that means we got only another week in February. We got March 7th, maybe he's back training. It's not even like he's back at game speed. Yeah. Do you think we'll see him in the next window at all? And if so, or even if he was available, would you even bring him in at this point? And you probably wouldn't start him, but maybe as a super sub. What are you thinking about Gio Reyna's situation, assuming everything goes well from here on out?
It's hard because, right, if he's reestablishing himself in the team and he's fit and they want to monitor him and keep an eye on him and he's got this progress and he's like 80 to 90% there, then I could see the team being like, hey, we can't do it. On the flip side, obviously it's international break. We need the points. We need to qualify for a World Cup. And so I'm kind of torn between, like, do you Aaron Long him and you bring him in and kind of see how it goes just to have him back into the group again and know that he's almost there? Or do you bring him in to know that he could do 15, 20 minutes? Because if he's doing a half or if he's doing 40 to 60 for Dortmund, it would be a shame not to be able to rely upon him and do the same thing that they've done with Pulisic, where a little bit of that tension with Chelsea, and you say, hey, listen, we're going to do right by them. We're going to manage his minutes. We're going to manage his workload. He's going to be under sort of the watchful eye of our medical staff the entire time, and integrate him back into the team. Because even if you're Gio Reyna, life's pretty lonely where you are, right? Like, Dortmund isn't exactly the most fun place to live, and I'm sure he's got family coming in and out all the time and things like that. And I know his mom spent some time there. But you still want to be back. You know, it was always nice for me when I came back from Europe to the national team, because you're like, oh, I'm home again. I'm with my people. I just feel comfortable instead of sort of being in this sort of like dog eat dog environment plus being alone all the time. So I could see him coming in no matter what, but whether or not he's an active participant is to be seen, because we're quickly running out of time, and very rarely we saw them slowly working back over the last time when they could have put him in quicker. Like, you're going to quickly run out of days to get him his minutes for us to feel comfortable for him to be in the national team.
What's crazy to think about is that Gio Reyna only played in one World Cup qualifier with us, and that was away to El Salvador on match day 1, and he has not played since. And despite that, we found ourselves in second place. However you think we got there, we're still in second place with three more games to go. And I think that really speaks to the depth that we've now created and given opportunities to. I think Brendan Aaronson's the one that's probably taken, well, we could maybe argue Timo Weah as well. Both of those two in particular have taken the minutes that maybe have been vacated by Gio Reyna and made it their own. And now,
well, Gio and Pulisic at time opened up for more people.
That's true. I mean, there's And that's how I got into the national team. I got in because guys were hurt, and I tried to take advantage of those opportunities. And that's the way you have to get a
Well, how far, Jimmy, let me ask you this. How far down the pecking order do you think Gio Reyna is now? I mean, in theory, he's unbelievable. When he's at his best, he's unbelievable, but he's still, what, 18 now? 19 now. Okay. He hasn't played in a while. He's like, how far down the pecking order have we seen? Because when he's in the national team, there haven't been a lot of great performances from him yet, like through and through performances, and the way that you see him take over games, just in the way that we saw Pulisic take over games back in his Dortmund days. And obviously he's playing with Holland, which is something completely different. But I mean, is he legitimate? Is it like he's got to earn this? I mean, he's definitely got to earn it, but like, how is he legitimately behind these other guys now? Or is it just a matter of him getting his game again and then he's our starter?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that Greg has shown a propensity for trusting guys that have delivered for him. And not to say that Gio didn't when he played, but we've now gone through a pretty hardcore and intense qualifying phase. And if these guys get Greg and the team to the finish line and get us qualified, I think there's going to be a trust that's built there with those players that might be hard to break. I mean, we see it with the players that people that are like trigger points for, Legets and Roldans and Acostas of the world that they don't feel like deserve to be on there. But there's a trust clearly that Greg has of these players. And I think that's being established with an Aronson and a Timo Weah, that Gio's missing out on those opportunities to also do the same. So I think at this point, he's probably behind those guys, unless he's like playing at such a high level that it's so undeniable that you have to start him. I think that Aronson and Weah are probably ahead of him, but he's not too far off. I mean,
but you also have Jordan Morris, who's back in the
sure. No. He's in the conversation too.
You've got Areola. I mean, you're talking about too many players to go to a World Cup.
That's true. I mean, I think if Gio's healthy, he's going to go. But what do you think the odds are of somebody significant being hurt before that World Cup? I mean, it
has to be super high, right?
It has to be. I mean, this isn't isolated to our team, but it has to.
We're not wishing. Like,
no, of course. But I mean, let's just be realistic. There's probably going to be somebody that we're counting on at this particular moment that won't be available for us at the end of the year once we qualify. And that kind of speaks now to the bigger conversation I wanted to have, because Weah has been injury prone. Pulisic, Morris also has a tendency to be injury prone. That could be quite significant for us. And I think that's why it's been important for us to be able to create some depth and build some trust and rapport with other players, so we're not overly reliant on just 3 or 4 guys every single game.
Yeah, I would also say that just the shape of the national team continues to evolve, right? Of the way in which we play. And I think Pulisic is probably actually coming back into a better situation to the evolution, because Greg really liked his wingers high and wide in wide spaces. And I think that left Pulisic on islands at time. I'm not Pulisic. I'm talking about Gio Reyna here. It left Gio Reyna isolated on the touchlines, and I think he's much better even at Dortmund when he's in those half spaces, in the way that Brendan Aronson is, and has continued to push that. Now, Timothy Weah, his shoes are covered in that sort of paint from the sideline, because that's where he spends most of his time. But that's very different than a Gio Reyna or Brendan Aronson, who like to be a little more connected. Which I think that connection, you can have it on one side, but if you don't have that connection to a striker, and we're seeing this across the world, Chelsea and specifically, if you don't have that connection with the striker, you go these long periods without the striker staying in the game. And I think Gio Reyna is the type of player that he gets the ball and wants to combine quickly with strikers in and out of spaces. And I think that could be a great addition, having because of the fact that we're no longer relying purely or even at all on Josh Sargent at the moment, that you have now something different for us to try to work or tinker with if Gio Reyna does come back into the team.
Yeah, so there's obviously a ton of support for Gio in the chat, and we're on the same page. When he's in the team, he just provides this dynamic that maybe we haven't seen. I think Aronson has his specialties, of course. Timo Weah, as Heath's been describing, has his specialties that definitely provides some level of attack that maybe Gio doesn't like getting out wide. He likes to come central, as you mentioned. So obviously we want him back into the team. It just gives us more options to build. Now, there's still, one of the things when I think about Gio Reyna is I wonder how the players in the 9 spot would do when he's on the field. Like, I want to see Ricardo Pepi with Gio Reyna. What does that look like? We still haven't been able to be treated to that type of relationship and to see how they can work off of each other. Obviously, doesn't need to be said, but I'll say it anyway. Gio Reyna plays with Erling Haaland, arguably the best young number 9 in the world. And when he's not in, Daniel Malen is also very, very good. And so I'm just kind of curious as to what that potentially could look like, or if Gio Reyna maybe plays better with Jesus Ferreira. I mean, who knows, right? We just don't know that type of stuff yet, and I want him to get back sooner rather than later. So I guess the next question is, if let's say he is healthy, and Dortmund, there's a big ask. Will Dortmund even allow him to go? Because they didn't allow him to go, even though he was quote unquote relatively healthy from what we know now for the last qualifying window. Say he does come, would you start him in that Mexico City game if he was full?
No.
Okay.
I don't think so. I mean, I want to see, I fully agree with you. I want to see him with Ricardo, Pepi together, because if you go back again to the Honduras game, what made us turn on Honduras was that combination play between Pulisic and Ricardo, Pepi, where you're playing up underneath, you're following the ball. Now it's laying off to you. And now the game is wide open, right? It's up, back. And now you have your options. Like you say, up, back, and through. It starts to create a different kind of dynamic, because now you've pulled defenders out. And that's what Gio Reyna does really, really well, is his combination play with Holland is sort of feeding it up, following it underneath, or running through 1-2s, all those little things that actually pull players in and out of those tight spaces. Now, obviously, I think when you're talking about counterattacking and more direct play, I'd rather have probably Brenden Aaronson, or I'd rather have Tim Weah, because we know that when our chances are going to come, whether it's especially from wide areas, if team's going to sit back on you, actually maybe Mexico pushes up higher, but if a team's going to make it difficult for you and the space is going to come wide, that attack needs to be somewhat predictable for your players going into the box. And I think Tim Weah makes that predictability a little bit easier. But if you're talking about breaking down a team, when I think back at the last games, or most of qualifying, teams that sit super deep against you and really want to sort of sit in their blocks, destroy anything, try to kill rhythm, that's where I like Gio Reyna, because it's in, out, and he kind of has those darting little diagonal runs. And I think those types of dynamic movements and that he does are really hard to stop at any level, let alone in World Cup qualifying or in an international match. Yeah,
now the last time we played against Mexico, Gio Reyna in the team, he scored. That was in the Nations League final, and all three of our goals came off of set pieces in that particular matchup. So nothing really in the run of play, but Gio obviously was influential in that game, and scoring a goal was a bit of the cherry on top. And that was a game where I thought Mexico actually shut down Christian Pulisic, and Dest, who was playing on the left side, to great effect, and that allowed Gio Reyna to have to step up, or forced him in some ways to take more of the grip of the game. And I thought he was pretty good. Now, with regard to Gio, I just wonder, because let's just say this, everybody, whatever we do in Mexico is not going to dictate or change what has to happen against Panama at home. If we beat Panama at home, I just want to remind everybody, we will qualify for the World Cup. If we get a result in Mexico, if we can get 3 points there, then that's great. That's fantastic. And that will probably be enough as well. But let's assume, best case scenario, I'm feeling a draw on that one. It still doesn't mean anything, because we still need to go. It helps, but it doesn't get us to the finish line. And beating Panama would get us to the finish line. Panama plays Honduras in that first game, and they should get all 3 points given the state of Honduras at the moment, who are an absolute dumpster fire and have nothing to play for. So we'll see what their motivation is. I wonder if Gio's healthy, maybe you bring him on as maybe a spot sub, a super sub against Mexico, kind of see how he feels. And then I wonder if you risk him against Panama.
Oh yeah. Go
for it. I mean, that is the game. And he hasn't really been a part of the qualifying phase at all. Like he hasn't been one of our core guys throughout this process.
I mean, in my mind, Jimmy, I'm saying that based on him like getting at least up to 60.
Being 100. Sure.
Yeah, fully fit and not getting like 15 minutes and then he comes in, because then I think you use him in the same way that I like Christian Pulisic at times against some of these teams. If you can wear down a Panama for 70 minutes and you've got a Christian Pulisic off the bench, or a Gio Reyna off the bench, or even a Brenden Aaronson, just this busy where, okay, fine, you want to sit in your deep blocks for 70 minutes and defend against us and be these difficult to beat bastards, then fine, go ahead and do that. But we're going to throw in these super subs that have crazy energy, that are almost at a world-class level, that have this ability to bring the win home for us. And I think we saw that against what was it? Pulisic against, was it Mexico?
Mexico.
Yeah, Mexico, where it's just like that super sub energy where you're like, oh man, we've worn them down. And even though it's Mexico, you bring in that sub, and we've never really had super subs in the national team. We've had a lot of good players, but we've never had this type of player where you're like, when they come in, the game changes, right? I mean, is there anybody that you can think of that wasn't a bona fide starter in the national team where you were just like, there's not really a spot for him in the style of play, but when you bring them on,
maybe before they became bona fide starters. I remember when Clint Dempsey would come on as a sub when it's early on, and you're like, God damn, this guy, you know, you just knew it was a matter of time before he would be a starter. But he had to.
Yeah, it was Beasley early 2000s as well,
sure.
like 2001, 2, 3, and so I guess maybe 4. He was probably a full starter by then. But like you had these guys, but again, that dynamic changes when they're on the field because they just have that fearlessness that almost scares another team. When you look on the sideline and you go, oh my gosh, that's Christian Pulisic coming in, or that's Gio Reyna coming in. That changes.
Yeah.
Like when Diego Lainez and it was Lainez and I can't remember who else came in for Mexico in the Nations League final. I was like, oh man. And they ran us side to side. And every time they were in the build-up of an attack, you were like, oh my gosh, this is crazy, dude. These guys are so good. Like we now have enough depth to actually naturally, you're going to have to make some tough decisions if you're Greg Berhalter. And a few of those guys, whether it's because of your style of play or the opponent or where you're playing or if it's group play in a World Cup or whatever, you're going to have to make some tough decisions. That's not just naturally the 11 players that we want to see. It's going to have to be probably a little more balanced. And that's going to give us some of those options off the bench. When you look at Tecatito Corona when he doesn't start for Mexico and others where you're just like, they're making tough decisions. And we're going to have that too, where even though, we'll always have the excuse and the fans will always be pissed off if we lose a game or whatever. And you're like, look at the weapons you had on the bench and didn't start them. And that's sort of the process of this all, but it's certainly a good problem to have.
No, 100%. When I think about Mexico, they got, if everybody's healthy, Chucky Lozano, Raul Jimenez, and Tecatito seem to be their natural or best on paper front three, but then they can bring on Alexis Vega, Henry Martin, and Linus, and you're like, all right, this seems to be a little unfair because all 6 of those players are very, very good. And I think we're getting to that point as well, right? Except our number 9 maybe hasn't been as settled. Can we talk about that really briefly before we go to a break? I mean, Ricardo Pepi did not play, or he played very sparingly at the very end for Augsburg this past weekend in their loss at home. What are you saying about, let's just say in the Bundesliga and Americans in Bundesliga, what are you thinking about Ricardo Pepi at the moment?
I mean, dude, I've been through what he's going through, and he's a striker. And I was playing left midfield or left back when we were in a relegation battle in the Bundesliga. There is no joy in that. There is no development in what we were doing. Yeah, you kill each other on the training pitch. The players are all fighting to get on the field. They're trying to get bonus. It makes you a better person, maybe not a better person, but a better, more rounded player. But he's a striker, right? Like my job as a defender is really all just you can do a lot of things, but it can still be a subjective experience. The striker is just going to be judged on whether or not he scores goals, right? Especially when they have the money that they've spent on him. Yes, he's young and they know that, but they're in a relegation fight, right? They're going to go with whoever they have to go with that they think is going to get them the results that keep them in the league, because there's millions and millions and millions of dollars at stake to get it right. And so if he's off or he's not finishing or he's not confident or any of these things, he's going to fall down the pecking order. And that sucks, because in most other clubs, and people we talk about like, oh yeah, put players in these high stress environments and it'll make them better. Yeah, in the long run, it'll make him better. But in the short term, it's hurting the national team that he's at a club that's fighting relegation. And it makes his odds of starting as a young player who's barely proven anything much harder if he has a dip in form. And so for me, when I think about him in general, I still continue to wonder, like, man, what was the decision around going to this club for a young player like that? When, granted, there's a lot of clubs that probably couldn't afford him at his age, and almost, whatever, 20 plus million plus probably some additional kind of fees if he scores those goals. But man, it worries me. I mean, what's your take on him being there in a situation like that?
I think that we're seeing a little bit, and to somebody's comment, he did well in his 10 minutes. I mean, every time he's come on, you can see why they signed him. You can see his talent every time he comes on. Are his touches? Yeah, we want them to be a little bit cleaner. Can he connect with his teammates a little bit better? Can they give him better service? Yes, to all the above there. But I think the most important thing is you can see why he's a special player. And now it's just a matter of continue to get assimilated into the team and into the style of the league and the pace of the league.
But is it the same, Jimmy, in 6 months if they go down or even stay up? I mean, Augsburg's still going to be Augsburg, right? Like, they're never going to be a team that's pushing for one of like the top 8 positions. They're going to be a team that 1 year maybe is top half of the table, 1 year is in the middle, 1 year is in fighting relegation. I mean, where's the upside for him? Scoring double-digit goals and then getting sold on?
Well, I think that was the plan. I mean, I think you were making an investment in him. That's what I always thought. I mean, Augsburg was never going to be his final destination.
But at 20 million, Jimmy? He'd have to score almost 20 goals to like start to, or say 16, 17, 18 goals when you start, if you're going to go from 20 to the next thing.
Right. No, I get it. But I'm just saying that I think there's some marketing angle here too, where all of a sudden Augsburg becomes a little bit more, recognized in the States. And that's obviously working because we never talk about Augsburg otherwise. And now we talk about them all the time. What I'll say though, very quickly, is the Bruno Guimaraes signing for Newcastle, right? He comes very highly touted from Lyon. And then all of a sudden, that team goes on a 5-game unbeaten streak, Newcastle. They win 3 straight games, and Eddie Howe, the manager, doesn't want to change anything. Because in some ways, finally, Newcastle, these players have pressure for their jobs. If you're not good enough, we're going to go buy somebody that's better. And that is what I think is happening at Augsburg a little bit, especially with Gregoritsch up top. Because since Pepi's been in the team, he has scored 4 goals. I'm looking at it right now. 4 goals in his last 6 games. Mm-hmm. And not to say he wasn't scoring before, but I think that's lit a fire under some of these players that, hey, we got this young kid. We just paid a lot for him. We're going to play him at some point. But if you play so well, if you're starting ahead of him, that you're almost undroppable, that becomes a little bit harder. If Pepi has a day where he doesn't train very well, or in his minutes he doesn't do a lot, it just kind of creates a little bit of a gap that maybe, and puts some doubt in the coach's mind that maybe Pepi's not ready yet, and that bums us out, obviously, because we need a number 9 as sharp as possible for this upcoming window.
Yeah, but here's my thing about Augsburg in general, Jimmy, is that they play a few different styles of play, but what they generally do play with is 2 strikers. And he's not getting time in a 2-striker system. And I would love to see him playing a 2-striker system with the national team. I would love to see players running off of him, but his style of play closer to Gregoritsch's and whatever. And he's still a teenager, and he's still a kid, and he's still got a lot to figure out. And he went from super high linked to every big club in the world to a team that's fighting relegation on a huge transfer fee. It almost feels like this perfect cocktail. I think he's going to be great. I think he's going to be an unbelievable striker for the national team for a very long time. He's just in a situation, which was, like you said, worst case scenario, where the player that he's competing with is now scoring because you brought in this young, spring chicken. And now you've got a bunch of people that are fighting for their lives and bonuses and a team that's fighting to stay up. They're in the playoff position now for the relegation playoff position now, but it's not a pretty situation to be in, Jimmy. I'm telling you, I've been in that. It's very, very stressful, and it's not fun, and it's not enjoyable. And it's not like he came from MLS where it's a positive environment more often than not. Even when things are bad, you're still working towards something. You're still 3 wins away from being back in a playoff position and all those kinds of things, right? Unless you're in a really, really bad place in MLS, it's a pretty positive environment. And then you add that to the hype of a kid who's only really played 1 full season. It's a very different environment. It'll make him a fantastic and a much better player. But at this moment, I guarantee you he's not having very much fun right now.
But isn't that the whole impetus for wanting to have our players leave MLS to go to Europe, is so they can get
big time,
so they can get punched in the face, get back up, and then we're going to figure out what type of player we actually have on our hands. And so that's it, right? And that's what we're going through right now. And so I think it's a great thing for you. I'm with you 100%. It's going to make him so much better moving forward, but it has to hurt right now because now he's got to figure out who am I, what am I about, and how do I it's the biggest question. If you're a professional athlete, how do you regain your confidence when you don't have any? Where do you get that from when you're not feeling good and you're insecure? That is the ones that can crack that nut and figure out a way to kind of fake it until they make it are the ones that end up having the longest careers. That's what I'm going to add to that.
The last thing I'll say on Ricardo Pepi is the other American that played at Augsburg was Michael Parkhurst. Do you know when Michael Parkhurst went to Augsburg? When he was 29 years old. And that's the difference now between these players. We are arguing as whether or not a 20 million euro signing who's 18, 19 years old now is going to make it or not. And that's the new standard that we've set. Doesn't mean that, it doesn't mean that what we're saying is okay, but the standard has been set, right? There's a new standard. We're after the break, we're going to talk about players in the knockout rounds of the Champions League, most of which that are at the top of the list or will be at the top of the list are young players playing now with still 7-8 years of upside. And that's the thing I like about Ricardo Pepi. This is a moment in time that's going to help shape him as a striker, as opposed to him going and maxing out in the Bundesliga at the peak of his career at a team that's fighting relegation. We are past that moment, and so his upside is incredible, but we're going through a tough moment with him right now where every game and every minute and every month matters towards his development, and he's struggling a bit.
All right, what do you guys think? Hit us up in the comments with what you think. Ricardo Pepi, good thing, bad thing? Are you frustrated for him? Gio Reyna, give us your thoughts on that. And of course, hit like and subscribe while you're doing that. Let's put out an old pinky and hit the old like and subscribe as well. Move the mouse to go make that happen. We're trying to get to 10,000 subscribers, and we can't do it without your loving support, I guess is the best way to say it. All right, we're going to take a quick break, excuse me. And when we return, we're going to talk about a question we got in the comments. If the U.S. men's national team was playing today, who would we start? We're going to get into that after this very special Champions League promo, because the Champions League is coming to you on Paramount Plus this week. Check it out.
Europe's top teams.
This is Neymar!
Europe's top talent, all competing.
Oh, that is beautiful!
To be crowned champion. The UEFA Champions League and the UEFA Europa League. Stream every match live on Paramount Plus.
Oh, I'm hyped for that. That was such a quick cut out of there. But here, we're back. U.S. men's national team hour. I'm Jimmy Conrad alongside Heath Pearce, two of your favorite former U.S. men's national team players, hashing it out with all the people that we love in the comments. Again, we appreciate your support. Hit the like and subscribe. Also, if you want more Qué Golazo in your life, because this is the U.S. men's national team hour of Qué Golazo, find us on podcast platforms and then go hit subscribe to that. Leave us a 5-star review. That would go a long way to getting more of the goods. And by goods, I mean a lot more free content. All right, let's get into this. The question was from Philip: if the World Cup started tomorrow, what is our starting 11, Heath? Do you want to work together on this one and then we can do like a combined thing, or do you want to do a separate? What are you feeling?
Yeah, no, let's do it together, because otherwise, it'll be the USMNT hours. If we I mean, I guess
back to front. Zach
Steffen. Okay, and then I'm gonna go with
unless he's got back spasms. I don't have time for Zach Steffen with back spasms.
He might come up with back spasms just before the World Cup, and then play in whatever summer tourney, or winter tournament that Man City put on.
Also, for everybody that's watching, give us your starting 11, and we'll throw up some of our favorites. Or producer Des will do that while we're talking.
Okay, it's got to be Robinson at left back. I'm gonna go, and I need to have Zimmerman. Give me another defender, Jimmy. Who do you want?
Zimmerman, I would say.
And have we dropped the back three, by the way? Or have we dropped?
I don't want to do back three. I like our back four. I got Serginho Dest at right back. Xavi was praising him like he should, to borrow that song from Moby. And he had a tremendous performance against Valencia this past weekend. And I think he's starting to settle into how Xavi wants to play and the players around him. So that's excellent. So I'll put Dest at right back. I still think Miles Robinson is the guy. I just think his rapport with Walker's very good. And we've seen plenty of evidence in multiple competitions and multiple games with that. Chris Richards, I think, is still an option, even though John Brooks has been pretty solid. I just don't think that he's in Greg's plans. So I think it's Zimmerman and Miles Robinson at this point, would probably who I go with, assuming everybody's still playing and playing sharp, right? Of course.
Yeah, if it was today, that's I think probably how I would land too. Aaron Long, I know, is somewhere in the mix of all this. Hasn't had a ton of time or matches, so it's tough to really. I don't want to bend the rules, so let's go with that back line. And I think, let's see here what Nia said. Push Zimmerman, Miles Robinson in the middle for headers. I mean, I think that's a good back line. So
I like the creativity there.
I like MMA as well as my midfield. I just think that there is some courage, some fight, some unbelievable skill in there as well. I do wonder at times, could we find a Gio Reyna in there? But again, if it was today, he's out. And then, or are we saying all things equal and it was today?
I think if Gio Reyna's back and he's in, I think Greg likes to play the inverted wingers, so like the double number 10s. I think having Gio have the flexibility, like having a starting position more central and then going out wide if the play dictates that, and then allowing your wing backs, especially if Serginho Dest is out wide, right? He's going to want to bomb forward, so you don't really want to get in his way. So you could put Gio Reyna in a front three, and I think it would be fine. I like MMA, right? I think that's the midfield going forward. The reason Valencia lost this past weekend is because Musa didn't start. Just want to throw that out there. That's my own slander and bias, or my slant, I would say, for the U.S. men's national team. And then up top, I think it's Pulisic, and then I think it's matchup based. If everybody's healthy, you go with Aronson, who's kind of. He provides something. Weah provides something a little bit different, as you mentioned before, and Gio Reyna provides something different. Then it's Pulisic, I think, is a lock. Even
Dude,
though
I'm looking at all these that people are sliding in here, and I'm seeing a couple MMAs, but I'm seeing a lot of Musa out of this. I mean, Musa's one of my first probably 5 or 6 that I put into my starting 11 when I'm building out the team,
100%.
just in terms of what he
I
does.
love
But
his
I'm
game.
seeing a lot of people saying, I'm seeing a lot of people with Pulisic as a 10 and a 3. I'm seeing a lot of people with, or not a lot of people, but a few people with Reyna in that 3 with McKinney, Adams, and Reyna. I mean, yeah.
I honestly, I don't mind that. And I like that suggestion because it allows us to bring another attacking minded player into the team that maybe can do a little bit more do different things than
I'm also seeing Pefok right now, which we're gonna talk about.
Yeah, we're gonna get into Jordan Pefok. Don't you worry.
I'm not seeing a lot of Pepi. I'm seeing a lot of sort of false 9s with Pulisic in there.
Well, would you consider Timo Weah as a 9 and then having potential?
I don't know, man.
So listen, Timo Weah is slated to start tomorrow because the player that had been playing in front of him while he was hurt, Andre or Gomez, he's going to be hurt. So it looks like Timo Weah is going to start against Chelsea at Stamford Bridge, which is a big moment for him. Just like Josh Sargent getting a start at Anfield against Liverpool. I mean, these are just big, huge life experiences that are only going to make these players better. But would you consider Weah at 9 so he could slot in another player? And I just feel like Weah likes to drift a little bit wide right, and that's where he likes to have fun and create a success. But I don't know. Yeah. I could be talked into it.
Yeah, it's just, man, that's really tough. Not in an isolated sort of 9. I think if you changed your formation some, then okay, no problem. Mm-hmm. If you had somebody up closer to him, if you're playing with a 2-striker system, him running off with a little bit, again, that's going to end up him roaming. So what's the point? Mm-hmm. So yeah, I don't know. I don't really like Pulisic there. Don't really like Weah there. I think, when we're talking about Jordan Pefok and the form that he's in, and we're talking about, hopefully Ricardo Pepi finding his form, and at least the potential of Ricardo Pepi, I still like the idea of having a traditional number 9 by any means necessary. And we do have a player that's in incredible form right now, so why not?
Well, let's just talk about Jordan Pefok, and then we'll get back into the Champions League. I'm going to kind of go backwards or in reverse order for a little rundown that we had. But Jordan Pefok, I think, is so undeniable. We have to talk about him right now, especially as we build this starting lineup. The man has scored 8 goals in his last 5 games for Young Boys. That is getting into undeniable territory, Heath Pearce. I mean, to the point where I think you have to call him in. But what I understand, the knock on Pefok is that he doesn't necessarily press the way that Greg Berhalter likes, that he doesn't necessarily stay as connected with the group as Greg Berhalter would like. And I'm of the mindset of, if you got a hot hand, you bring him in and you make sure that he finds a way to get connected to the group and that he presses the way that you want. And I would assume that if you're on the precipice of making a World Cup team, or at least my mindset would be, I'll do whatever it takes to make sure that I make it. Tell me what you want me to do and I'll do it. And then I'm just going to add in my top form on top of it. And that should be a match made in heaven, but it doesn't always seem to work out that way. What are you thinking about Jordan Pefok? And do you feel like Greg should call him in for this upcoming window?
Even if you don't like him, he's got a hot hand. And we've seen that in the past where you've got to look at this, 33 games played, 19 goals. And you're looking at a list of, again, most goals by U.S. players in Europe this season. It's an incredible amount of goals. And here's 2 things that I like about that. One,
by the way, all 4 of these players don't get called in for the national team.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Christian Ramirez shout is solid. Haji Wright as well. But here's the thing that I like about Jordan Pefok is he is in form. And I think that's the most important part of any of this. Now, when we were talking about a few months ago, it's, Jordan Pefok, maybe like he did okay. Nations League, like he's a big body. What kind of player is he? We've also got Josh Sargent, who was sort of the go-to still then. And we've got this, Ricardo Pepi guy that's coming through. Well, now you've got a guy who's undeniably in form. And therefore, you have to play him or at least bring him in to say, hey, I've got this hot hand. When the timing's right, I'm going to get this inkling to put him in to close out a game for you. He's big. He covers a lot of ground. He covers a lot of space. He occupies a lot of space in the box. And he's got a hot hand. So you have to bring him in. There's no way you can deny this level of form. And yeah, you can talk about the league that he's playing in and all these things. But when you're inching on 20 plus goals in a calendar year or in a full season, you're getting close to that sort of, this guy's going to be probably sold to a Bundesliga club or a top 4 or 5 in France, or, you're starting to inch into that territory of like, okay, this guy's going from being hot to being like, okay, he's rounded the corner and now he's a goal scoring striker. And so when you look at the last 8 games again, or 5 games, whatever, it's like 8 goals. He had 4 against, I think it was Lugano that he had 4 goals against. He's in peak form, so you have to bring him in. And the other thing I like, the part 2 of that, which I just mentioned, is this. Even if he's denied by the national team, which I'd be so disappointed in, because you just can't. You know, every manager has had their hand forced from time to time, regardless of who they want to bring in, because of form, especially when it comes to strikers. But again, the thing that I like about this is now he gets a chance to go probably to another club. He's probably going to get sold this summer, and that's the most important thing for me.
Because I saw Venezia was interested in him in the January transfer window, but that's still a bit of a risk because they're in a relegation scrap, you know, and I don't know. It's tough. I wonder where he would end up. You know, could he go maybe make a move to France? Like Jonathan David's going to leave Lille. Could he go to a Lille of that kind of quality where you're in the Champions League group stages and you might win the league like they did last season, but you know, you're not necessarily the creme de la creme of Europe. You're more of a tier 2 club, I would say. I mean, I think that's a natural stepping stone from young boys, but I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I think that there is probably, I think he could be a double-digit striker a year in a number of one of the top sort of 5 leagues. Maybe not. I don't really like him in the Premier League. I mean, he's physical, he's big. He can occupy space, but he's just going to end up getting pushed to like a Norwich or something like that wants to spend that type of money on that type of risk. But if you got to a Bundesliga, I could see him being at a Wolfsburg, or again, pre sort of this season Wolfsburg, or I could see him being at one of these that likes to play with a traditional number 9 who's a big body up top that scraps for a lot of second balls, that, you know, gets it in around the box, can finish his opportunities. So I think somewhere like in the top half of the Bundesliga. Again, he's not going to be, the upside isn't going to be Chelsea for him. It's not going to be, you know, whatever. He's 25 years old and he's in great form right now, and he's showing that he can score goals. And so I think there's somewhere out there where he can be a double-digit striker a year in a top 5 league for a team that's not just battling relegation all the time. And I think that's a great move. And I think it's a great addition to our national team to have somebody like that, as opposed to these super highs and lows of all the young players we're having right now, which is, you know, they end up going, okay, Josh Sargent, Werder Bremen playing every game. Werder Bremen's going down, and now he's at Norwich with sort of, he's still playing. And I think it's great experiences, but I wonder for a player like him, was there a better option out there?
Yeah, I wonder. There's a lot of questions around Jordan Pefok, but he's going to answer a lot of those questions if he continues to score and hit the back of the net. And I think he'll have to force Greg Berhalter's hand, because he'd just be so obvious that you have to call him in, especially in games that we need to win. And we need guys that can score
in the Champions League. Like, it's not
Twice.
like he's
got
crap.
2 goals in the
it's
Champions.
not like he's just crap and playing in a crap league and hit a run of form. Like, you know, by any means. I know Michael Bradley scored almost 20 playing for Heerenveen, and I know Josie Altidore was 20 plus in Holland. I know people don't give as much credit to some of these other leagues, and I'll tell you, the Swiss league is not even close to the Dutch league, or it's probably somewhat close, but not there. Yeah, you've got some historic clubs that have done well in Europe and things like that. And it's no walk in the park. And I understand that it's also not. I'd liken it probably to the top leagues in Scandinavia and things like that. However, scoring goals is scoring goals, and he's done it in more than just the domestic league, you know. And so I think it would be stupid not to bring him in, knowing that he's at least hot, and you might get a chance to see that come to life when you need it most.
Well, I'm curious to see what Greg Berhalter elects to do. All right, now let's move on to the Champions League. After you hit like and subscribe and leave some comments about how much you love the show, the U.S. Men's National Team Hour. We're coming at you every Monday here on the YouTubes. Champions League now. We have Chelsea taking on Lille. That game's kicking off tomorrow at 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern on Paramount Plus. And it has an opportunity here. As I mentioned, Timo Weah is probably going to start for Lille at Stamford Bridge, but will Christian Pulisic? And if that happens, they'll be the first pair of Americans to play against each other in the Champions League knockout rounds. That is a big deal. Now, Christian Pulisic is the all-time leader in knockout round appearances for an American with 13. DeMarcus Beasley is second on 6. And these records are going to be broken a lot by some of our older players because just of the influx of Americans coming over. It's just a matter of time before we start smashing all of this. Even Pulisic's records, I think, will get broken at some point by some of our talented younger players that are coming through. But a big, big monumentous moment here, Heath Pearce, to have 2 Americans going up against each other in the knockout rounds.
Yeah, it's huge. It's again, another sort of important milestone for us in our development in U.S. soccer, right? These are guys that are putting themselves out there and challenging themselves in very difficult environments. And now we're starting to see that competition come to life, right? The fact that not even just, and I know this is the USMNT hour, and that's the angle, and that's the hook and the hype, but we've also got, Canadians playing in this. So just for the region in itself, I think it's just a really important moment to discuss with regards to that. The question is, as it always is for me, when I look at those two players and I go, okay, Pulisic, yeah, and Weah, yeah, neither of them have been sure starters all the time, right, at their clubs. And while this is good on paper, I wonder, like, okay, what happens after this? Well, where does it go from here? Is it just, we know that, like you mentioned before, that Timothy Weah is going to start likely because there's a player out in his position. That's great. But how far are we from seeing the next step of him saying, hey, this guy's a consistent Champions League player, right?
Yeah.
This guy's a starter in a Champions League team, or this guy's a starter in a top team in the league. Because when you see him at his best, like, man, this guy's unbelievable. But what is it that they're seeing on a daily basis in France that buries him in the lineup? And don't get me wrong, they're the champions. They're not as good in the league this year as they were last year when they won the championship. However, they're still a big team, but they got rid of a lot of these players, but he's still trying to establish himself as a starter.
Well, look at these stats right here. I mean, I think the stats kind of tell it, at least from Timo Weah's perspective. I mean, he is an attacking player on a team that won Liga last season. He's played 23 matches in all competitions. He's scored
an insane amount of goals last season, by the way.
Yes, and he scored 0 goals so far and has only had 3 assists. And I think that's probably what's holding him back is he being dangerous enough when he gets his opportunities on the ball? Now, I'll raise my hand and say I haven't watched enough of Lille to really break down the Timo Weah. I mean, obviously, I'm watching him quite closely with the U.S. men's national team, but I'm not diehard week in and week out with Lille to see how he's performing. But I do obviously pay a little bit more attention to Christian Pulisic at Chelsea. He got the start. I'll just pivot over to him really quick against Crystal Palace this weekend, and it looked like Tuchel wanted him to be more centrally located. And, he finds himself in good spots like he does every game. He's got world-class ability. We know that to be true. It's undeniable that he's very good in 1v1 situations. He's very good at creating space to set up a run to either make a pass into space or to actually receive that pass. And he's got good composure in and around the box. And despite Romelu Lukaku setting some crazy record of only having 7 touches for 90 minutes in a game for a number 9, that's crazy. Pulisic didn't suffer from that so much. He did get in and around the ball, and I thought he was pretty solid, all things considered. I didn't feel like he was lacking any confidence, which I think was kind of the red flag that we'd seen before, especially some of his comments, too, of where he was at mentally and how he was feeling emotionally. And even though I think it's super important for him as a human to evolve into getting in touch with his feelings, it doesn't always lend itself to being successful as a player if you can't compartmentalize some of the adversity that's coming your way. And that might be a topic for another show, because there's a lot to unpack with that particular narrative. But I hope that Pulisic starts, and I just don't know if he's going to, because I just don't know if Tuchel sees him as a starter, very similar to what you're saying before about Weah. I mean, sometimes coaches get locked in on, that's my super sub over there, and they kind of give you a nickname as a super sub just so you start to embrace it in another way. And I fear that Tuchel kind of has Pulisic in that category, sadly.
I agree. Yeah, I mean, at least there's a conclusion, though, right? The worst thing is over the last 12 months, 18 months, you look at Pulisic and you go, is he a starter? Is he not? He's in, and then he's out, and then he's hurt, and then he's in, and then he's out, and then he's hurt. At least now I think we're nearing this answer, which is that he's probably not a starter under Tuchel when he has as many options as he had, when he has all of his options available, which is a great thing if you're Pulisic, because at least the writing's on the wall for you to probably need to go somewhere else to get your minutes, which I think is a good problem to have. As opposed to being like he's been labeled sort of a super sub, right? And he doesn't want to be a super sub, which means his future probably lies elsewhere, as opposed to just fighting for something he's never going to get. I at least think we get a conclusion on that, which is a lot harder than what we've been sort of seeing previous to the last few months, now that he's healthy again, which was like he's in, he's out, he's in, he's out, he's injured. And it's just this constant cycle of like, oh, Tuchel's tinkering again. Who's in the lineup? Who's not? And if that's hard for a player to not ever know if they have that trust or not. And the fact that he knows that he doesn't now may help him to play better, because you just sort of play with a little less like of that baggage of like, oh, I need to impress. And so you're a little more free knowing that you're probably on your way out, and he's still getting his minutes, which I think is really important. But again, I always wonder about just the final product of both him and Timo Weah, and the edge, that little tiny gray area between like class and world class, which is like, we can see that they can bring attacks to a conclusion. We can see the creativity. We can see it, but do they have that final product on a consistent enough basis that puts you in that little category that we see from the top players in the Premier League, the top players in all the leagues, top 5 leagues around the world, sort of that just extra bit of class that puts them on another category. Jonathan David has proven to have that even when he's not playing well and things like that. He still goes and he scores goals, right? So what's that X factor that you have that keeps you on the field? Like you said, what is it? 0 goals, 3 assists for Timo Weah in 22, 24 matches so far this year.
Yeah.
Not a great number. A lot of that's probably off the bench, and you start to go, hey, well, give me more time and I could probably create more chances, because they both created decent chances, at least on that.
Only 10 starts, 10 starts in the league out of 19 games. So maybe not making the most of his time. And there was a change in manager, which I think obviously could change in terms of how because he, as you mentioned, he did score goals last year under Christophe Galtier, who left to go to Nice. And now they got somebody else in who's got their own ideas about how they want to attack and how and where and all that good stuff. So I think that might want to, or at least we'll give him the benefit of the doubt that that might be a possibility as to why he could be struggling. All right, now the other game happening tomorrow on Paramount Plus, kicking off at the same time, 12 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Eastern, is Villarreal hosting the mighty Juventus. Now, I've been a little disappointed because now that Zakaria has been signed from Mönchengladbach into the midfield, it looks like Locatelli and Zakaria are going to kind of be somewhat of a double pivot. But Allegri has elected to go with Rabiot in midfield as opposed to Weston McKennie. And McKennie ends up coming in when Dybala cuts out, a little bit hurt, I think, in the 53rd minute against Torino this past weekend. I'm just disappointed that McKennie wasn't the first choice. And so I wonder if he'll be the first choice or be involved at all in this particular game in Spain. Dybala's out. They're having some issues in the center back position. But I don't think that midfield's going to change. And I feel like Juve might be a little bit conservative in leg one here. Do you think we're going to see Weston McKennie against the Yellow Submarine?
I don't know. I mean, this is probably the biggest disappointment because he went from not on my list to sort of top of my form list and just showing it in every which way, where you start to just see this different energy out of him in the last few months. And again, we're spoiled, right? We're talking about whether or not Weston McKennie should start in the Champions League at his age at Juventus and the form that he's been in. And at any given time, he might or might not be our best player in the national team, right? He might be 7 or 8 based on how many good players we have at the moment, which is amazing to talk about. But it is a little disappointing because of the form that he's been in, the confidence that he's been in, and the results he's been helping the team get. Juventus are on a great run right now. And I know Allegri's a little bit critical of Rabiot over the weekend. And so I'm not sure if that makes a change or puts Weston McKennie in prime position to get the start. I mean, what's your take on it? You think he gets the start? And I guess does the way in which we look at him matter when it's in the context of a club team and they're seeing him day in, day out?
I think it does. I also think it depends on how Allegri wants to attack it. I get the sense he's going to go Carlo Ancelotti on this one, like Madrid did in Paris, and just, hey, let's not stretch ourselves too thin here. If we're going to try to hit him, let's just, if we get a set piece, we'll try to score there. But let's not commit too many numbers going forward and take that risk, because the away goals is out, so we don't have to go chase an away goal. Let's just be conservative. And it almost worked for Madrid. They almost got out of Paris with a 0-0 draw until Mbappe did Mbappe things. But what I think McKennie maybe lacks, as opposed to Rabiot, who stays a little bit more central, maybe I'd say has more positional discipline. I think if you told McKennie, I want you to do this today, he'll do it. But I think his instincts are to take risks. And I love that about him. That's one of my favorite parts about him as a player, is that he recognizes a situation. I have a chance to gain a numerical advantage. I have a chance to get on the end of this cross. And he'll go for it. And I love that about him. But if you're trying to maintain that discipline in leg one, knowing this is the first half, maybe you elect to go with a Rabiot who's just going to stay at home. He's probably a little bit better in tight spaces to play out of stuff in terms of possession. I've seen Rabiot. I got to watch PSG train one time in New York when they came over to the States to do some summer tour. And I thought Rabiot was another level, dude. I watched those guys play. And that's when Zlatan was still there. And he was unbelievable in tight spaces. So I really have like this different type of appreciation for Rabiot. But he's very good in those situations. And you feel like you're going to be under it with Villarreal. Having a player that can hold the ball to help you transition from back to front could be a little bit better than what maybe McKennie can provide. So I want to see McKennie play, of course. I think he got that clutch gene as well. We talk about it a lot. We associate that a lot with him. But I don't know if they need it in leg 1. They might need that more in leg 2 based on how leg 1's result goes. So I don't know if we're going to see him or not, but I don't know. We'll see. So let's move on to another player, though. I just want to mention Brenden Aaronson. Bayern Munich's not playing this week. It'll be in leg 2. But in leg 1, he became the youngest player since Leo Messi did it against Celtic in 2008 to create 5 chances in a Champions League game. What do you think that says about Brenden Aaronson's progress and evolution, and maybe a little bit about Bayern's defense?
Yeah.
just to play devil's advocate.
Yeah, I mean, and Bayern went straight from there into, down 1-0 in the Bundesliga, only to obviously come back and win comfortably. But, there is something to be said about that performance from Brenden Aaronson. More so in the fact that we started with Brenden Aaronson as this like high energy, bundle of energy that's just a positive sort of vibe for the national team on the field, right? Just all over the place all the time, to now seeing a legitimate attacker come to life. And I think that's where we're probably going to see that 30 million range hit in the transfer window, the next transfer window, by Leeds or whoever it is. Like, we're going to see that number hit for him. And he's entering into that, again, that category of not a lot of transfers happen at that number. I mean, I know they do, because it's the market value is outrageous now for all players, but I mean, it's just showing that there's a legitimacy to him as a player, that it's not just these flashes of, look, Brenden Aaronson scored and Brenden Aaronson created an attacking chance in Austria, another league that you're just like, yeah, but it's Austria. You're starting to see him against legitimate opponents show up. And so, I less so about Bayern Munich and more so about Brenden Aaronson, that we're just seeing a player developing in real time and building that consistency. And he's another young one that just, you go back again, 12, 18 months, we weren't really talking about him other than saying, oh, he could have some upside, and he's potentially being sold to RB Salzburg, who's a team that isn't as good, weren't as good before as they are this year in the Champions League. And they're just the biggest club in Austria. So it's amazing.
It is amazing. And my only fear for Brenden Aaronson, this is it, is that he leaves in the summer, and I think he will, from RB Salzburg. And if Bielsa's still in charge of Leeds, we could see him at Leeds, which would be a nice fit, because he kind of fits that Bielsa style: high energy, high press, get after him, transition quick, all that type of stuff. But would he fall into maybe a Ricardo Pepi situation, where he goes from being the guy at RB Salzburg, playing in some good competitions, playing against the Bayern Munichs of the world, to then maybe only getting minutes against the Burnley, or teams that aren't going to push him? I don't know. That's just, I don't think I had to extrapolate that. That's my only fear, is that he goes to a club and all of a sudden he's not getting the minutes that we need him to be, so he can be sharp for the World Cup. That's all I care about, Heath. I don't care about Leeds' future.
Listen, no, but that's why I like Leeds, right? Like, he's a player that you bring in for Leeds, because if it's not Bielsa, like, just that high energy style is the closest thing he's going to get to Salzburg, in the way that they press, they transition, sort of the wide openness of those games, the energy that he brings, the willingness to cover ground, all of those things. Now, if he was going to a different club, I would be a little more worried, right? Because you're talking about a team that's, inching towards a relegation battle in Leeds. But the style in which they play, I think he could still become a better player, like we've seen with some of their players this year with Rafinha. We've seen that with Jack Harrison. We've seen a number of these players do well and become better players, but they're not in the position that Ricardo Pepi's in at Augsburg, where it's just this constant, like, more of a Norwich type of scrap to stay in the league.
Okay, let's move on from Brenden Aaronson, who's been playing very well, to another player that Xavi, the manager of Barcelona, and I quote, said after this game against Valencia, Barcelona's game against Valencia, Serginho Dest is playing spectacularly well. I can't even roll off my tongue. Yeah. I'm so excited to say that.
It's because you're Catalan. You're Catalan. You don't know how to use those.
He said, I'm very happy. This is Xavi. I'm very happy with his progress. When we arrived, Xavi and his coaching staff, he wasn't doing so well. And now he's doing well with and without the ball. I love that Xavi added that without the ball. That's very Barcelona mentality DNA to say and to state. And now, Serginho Dest said after the game, I saw his comments afterwards saying he wants to push to be available for that game against Napoli in Naples. He wants to play in that game. And I think he saw that first game against Napoli where they had Mingueza, normally a center back, getting forward and hitting crosses in. And I remember watching the game going, if they were going to have that, why not just bring in Dest? So I'm glad that it kind of lit a fire under Dest to, like, if I get my chance against Valencia, I'm going to make the most of it. And he did. And the fact that Xavi's saying that about him warms my heart, Heath Pearce. It really does.
Yeah, my I guess my closing thought on him is that it's another player who's in a very tough environment and he's figuring it out. And instead of just flopping and whining and complaining and leaving, he's figuring it out. And we're seeing that come to fruition of just putting in the work, because you see some of that raw, all these players in our national team pool, so much raw talent that needs to be harnessed and shaped and molded into becoming complete and potentially world-class players. To see that sort of him round that corner from a confidence standpoint makes me happy as a US fan to know that, hey, this is a guy that could be potentially the best fullback if he is on the ball and off the ball, doing the things that Xavi says at the World Cup at the end of this year.
This is a great problem to have. I love having these types of problems. So many players playing well and some that aren't. But as you mentioned at the very beginning, these are part of the growing pains of either going to Europe or going through any other struggles that are happening. But Heath, I'm looking at my watch right now, and this is the U.S. Men's National Team Hour, and we are coming upon an hour, everybody. So we are going to call it a show for this week. We appreciate your support. So before you go, hit that like and subscribe button if you haven't already. And we look forward to seeing your beautiful faces the next time around. So on behalf of producer Des Norris and Heath Pearce, I'm Jimmy Conrad, and we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Later.